Spouse laments following Liberating Counsel to redefine marriage. My wife's been kicking herself lately for buying into some fancy talk about opening up our marriage, and now I'm stuck trying to figure out how to patch things up. I'm here asking for some pointers on how to save what's left of us. Let me lay it out for you. Me and my wife, we've been hitched for 5 years, been a couple for 7 total. To keep things private, I'll call us James and Skylar. We crossed paths back in our 2nd year at community college. I walked away with a 2-year degree in office management, while James kept going and snagged a 4-year business administration degree from one of those universities that runs classes online through the college. Jump ahead to now. I'm 26, James is 27, and we had big plans to start a family later this year. We dreamed of having 4 kids, hoping for a couple of boys and a couple of girls. Life was good, our marriage was solid, and both our families thought the world of us. But then I went and messed it all up, big time. See, I got myself tangled up with this guy at work. Not a full-blown thing, but close enough to cause trouble. He's a delivery driver for one of those giant shipping companies, the kind everybody knows. For the sake of keeping his name out of it, let's call him Jaden. He's 25, single, and been dropping off packages at my office for almost 2 years. Right from the get-go, there was this vibe between us. Not love or anything mushy, just some kind of pull I couldn't ignore. I liked being around him, and every time he swung by, we'd chew the fat for at least 10 minutes. I get a little buzz knowing he was coming, always making sure I was the one up front when his truck rolled in. One day, things with Jaden took a turn. He showed up with his usual stack of packages and said he had something personal to ask me. He made it clear it was a big deal, and he didn't want me getting upset or it messing up our work vibe. I told him, "Go ahead, man. You can ask me anything." So he laid it out. He said he felt this strong pull toward me and wanted to know if I felt the same. That caught me off guard, and I'll admit, it threw me a little. His gutsy move made my face heat up, but I took a second to think it over and gave him the honest answer. I said, "Yeah, I feel it too." Jaden told me if I wasn't married, he'd have asked me out right then and there. I laughed it off, thanked him for the boost, and that was it. He headed out, and we left it hanging. For the next week or so, things got weird between us. When he'd roll in with deliveries, we'd just trade a few stiff words, small talk about nothing, like the weather or traffic. It bugged me, and I started feeling rotten, like maybe I'd stepped over a line I shouldn't have. That guilt just wouldn't quit gnawing at me. Back home, though, me and James were doing great. Let me be straight, I've never had a single complaint about James. He's everything I could want in a husband, a buddy, and in the bedroom too. I'm pretty sure he'd have said the same about me back then. The guy's perfect for me, no question. But even with all that, I started daydreaming about something dumb. How I could keep my awesome husband and still have some kind of side thing with Jaden, more than just our package drop chats. I didn't know it then, but folks call that wanting to have your cake and eat it too. Curiosity got the better of me, so I started poking around online, reading up on stuff like polyamory and open marriages. At first, I thought it was all nonsense, kind of creepy even, so I brushed it off. Plus, I knew James would never go for it. And even if he did, I figured it'd wreck what we had. Our families would probably flip out and cut us off, which was the last thing I wanted. So I tried to shove it out of my head and focus on the good life we were living. Weeks rolled by, and life with James stayed golden as ever. We were tight, happy, no complaints. But that Jaden thing kept rattling around in my skull. I couldn't shake the urge to see if there was more to it, so I dove back into the internet, hunting for answers. I stumbled across this blog post called "It Doesn't Hurt to Ask." Some lady wrote it, swearing she'd cracked the code to a happy open marriage. She was nuts about her husband, but had this itch for a guy she met volunteering. Said she stewed on it for over 2 years, scared to death it'd torture marriage if she brought it up. Then one day, on a long car ride, she just blurted it out to her husband. Turns out he was all ears. They gave it a shot, started seeing other people a few times a month, and she claimed it had been 4 years of bliss. Marriage stronger than ever, both of them grinning like fools. That hit me square in the chest. It was exactly the crazy dream I'd been wrestling with, but I was too chicken to say it out loud to James. Then one lazy Sunday morning, we're sprawled out at home, messing around on our phones, shooting the breeze. I figured it was now or never, so I tossed it out there, real casual. "Hey, I just saw this thing online about open marriages. What do you think?" He shot back. "You mean like sleeping around with other people?" I nodded. "Yeah, that's it. What's your take?" He didn't mince words. Said it was flat out nasty, and if folks want to mess around, they should just split up and call it day. I tried pushing a little, saying it's getting big here in the States and all over the West. But his face scrunched up like he'd smelled something rotten, so I dropped it fast and switched gears. That look told me all I needed to know. I wasn't bringing it up again. Our marriage was too good to risk over some dumb idea like that. Fast forward a couple weeks, and we're tangled up in bed, still buzzing from some top-notch loving. I'm crashed out on his chest, just soaking it in, when out of nowhere, James hits me with, "So who'd you have in mind when you mentioned that open marriage stuff a while back?" That jolted me upright, stomach dropping like a rock. I peeked up at him and stammered, "What are you getting at? What do you mean?" When James asked who I had in mind for that open marriage talk, it threw me for a loop. My gut twisted up, and I propped myself up to look at him. "What are you getting at? What do you mean?" I said, trying to play it cool. Then he dropped this bomb. He'd been reading some stuff online that said when a wife brings up opening things up, it's a red flag. Either she's already stepped out, or she's got somebody waiting in the wings. That hit me like a freight train. I could see in his eyes he wasn't messing around. And he said, "I know you too well, Skylar. You're holding something back. Spill it." I froze, stared off for a second, then swore up and down I'd never cheated on him, never would. Could have left it there, but my mouth kept running. I admitted that if we ever went down that road, there was this guy from work I might think about. James didn't flinch. "Tell me about this work guy," he said, calm as you please. So I started laying it out, told him about Jaden, how we'd been chatting it up for a while, how he'd come clean about liking me. I left out that I'd told Jaden I felt the same, figured that'd be pouring gas on a fire. But then James said something that knocked the wind out of me. "You know you've already crossed the line, right?" I got hot under the collar and shot back. "No way, I haven't done anything." He didn't back down, though. "What you've got going with this Jaden fella, it's what they call an emotional affair." I never heard that term in my life, so he broke it down for me, real patient-like. That got my blood boiling even more. I was mad, confused, the whole mess spinning in my head. James could tell I was worked up and said, "Let's drop it for now. About an early morning, need to crash." He rolled over and was out like a light in no time. Me? I just laid there, wide awake, stewing over it all. Here's the next part, picking up from James suggesting we drop the emotional affair talk for the night, up to where he agrees to try an open marriage. Sticking to your rules. First person, simple American man style. No emojis or abbreviations. All details kept. Less than 60% similar to the original. Paraphrased with meaning preserved. AI voiceover ready. Full words and mistakes fixed. Here we go. After James told me to cool it, so he could sleep, he was snoring in minutes. Me, I couldn't shut my brain off. I grabbed my phone and started digging into this emotional affair thing he'd thrown at me. I scrolled through article after article, post after post, and the more I read, the sicker I felt. He wasn't wrong. What I'd been doing with Jaden wasn't just harmless chatting. It was deep enough to count as a real betrayal, even if I hadn't crossed any physical lines. That hit me hard. I felt like a jerk, like I'd stabbed James in the back without even realizing it. Sleep wasn't happening, so I slipped out of bed, shuffled downstairs, and brewed myself some tea. I finally nodded off on the couch around 4 in the morning, guilt still chewing at me. Come 6:45, James woke me up with a quick kiss, saying he was off to work and I'd better get moving too. It was almost 7. I kissed him back, told him I loved him, and I meant it more than usual, my voice heavy with all that regret over Jaden. The next few days dragged by, and then one night, we're lying there after some great time in the sack. Out of nowhere, James says, "If you really want to give this open marriage thing a shot, I'd be willing to try it." That blindsided me. I propped up and asked, "Why are you bringing this up now?" He said he'd been mulling over all our talks and figured if we were going to test it, better do it while we're still young and curious. I told him I was interested but swore I'd never let it wreck what we've got. He's the center of my world. He came back with, "If our love's solid, it can handle a little straying." I argued it wouldn't even be straying if we both signed off on it. He didn't bite on that, just said, "All right, let's call it open starting tonight." That threw me again, and I told him to pump the brakes. We needed some rules first. All right, here's the next part. From where I tell James we need rules for the open marriage, up to where I decide not to pursue it and keep my distance for Jaden. Following your rules. First person, simple American man style. No emojis or abbreviations. All details included. Less than 60% similar to the original. paraphrased with meaning intact, AI voiceover ready, full words and mistakes corrected. Here it is. I told James we couldn't just jump into this open marriage deal without laying down some ground rules. He nodded and said he had a few in mind. First, we'd have to tell each other who we're planning to hook up with and when ahead of time. Second, we'd spill the beans after it happened, but keep it light. No dirty details. Third, no messing around without protection, ever, full stop. I said those sounded fair to me, then tossed out a couple of my own. I want us to keep this whole thing hush-hush, just between us. And I wanted us to promise it wouldn't tear us apart, that we'd stay together no matter what. James shut that down quick. He said he wasn't signing off on either of those flat out. I pushed him, asking why not, but he just shook his head and said he didn't want to argue about it. That wasn't like him at all, and it left me with a bad feeling in my gut, like maybe he had some angle I couldn't see. We cuddled up anyway and drifted off, but that unease stuck with me. Something about how he acted made me think twice about the whole deal. So for the next month, I didn't push it. We just went on living like normal, business as usual. At work, I started pulling back from Jaden big time. When he'd show up with deliveries, I kept it short and sweet, talking about the weather, how slammed we both were, nothing deep. I wasn't about to let that spark flare up again, not after everything James and I had been through. Here's the next part, starting from where I keep my distance from Jaden, up to where I tell James about my planned meetup with Jaden and sense his stiffness. Sticking to your rules. First person, simple American man style, no emojis or abbreviations, all details preserved, less than 60% similar to the original, paraphrased with meaning intact, AI voiceover ready, full words, and mistakes fixed. Here we go. I was keeping things cool with Jaden at work, sticking to quick, surface-level chit-chat whenever he dropped off packages. But one day, he pulled me aside and said he missed our old talks. He asked what was up, why I'd gone quiet. I brushed it off, told him work and home were running me ragged, and I just didn't have time to shoot the breeze anymore. Truth was, my head was spinning with this open marriage mess. Right then, I made up my mind. I was going to tell him about it. Looking back, I'd give anything to undo that call. It didn't feel right to hash it out at the office, so I asked if he'd grab a drink with me after work. He said sure, and we met up at this bar with a nice outdoor patio, perfect for the warm spring air. Over beers, I laid it out, told him me and James had opened things up, and I straight up asked if he'd want to take our connection further. He didn't even blink, just said, yeah, I'm in. Said he'd been hoping I'd come around, holding back out of respect, but admitted he'd been dreaming about me for months. We got to flirting pretty heavy, and by the end of it, we set a plan to meet at his place the next day after work for our first real hookup. I made it clear I'd have to bounce by 6:30 to get home to James. He was still my number one, no question. That night, I got home and whipped up a killer dinner for James. After we ate, I sat him down and told him about my talk with Jaden, how we'd met up, and that I'd lined up a date at Jaden's place tomorrow if he was still cool with this open thing. I could tell it rattled him. He said, "Oh, all right, so you're seeing him tomorrow?" I nodded, but told him we could scrap it if he wanted. Him and us were what mattered most. He shook his head and said, "No, go for it." We hugged, but it felt off, stiff, distant, not like our usual tight squeeze. I chalked it up to him being nervous about the whole deal. Here's the next part, from where I sensed James's stiffness after telling him about the Jaden meetup, up to where James comes home late and talks about STD tests. Following your rules. First person, simple American man style, no emojis or abbreviations. All details kept, less than 60% similar to the original, paraphrased with meaning preserved, AI voiceover ready, full words, and mistakes corrected. Here it is. That hug with James left me uneasy, like something wasn't right, but I figured it was just jitters. We didn't talk much after that. He holed up in his office working, and I had my own stuff to tackle. When we hit the sack, I tried getting close, spooning up to him, hoping for some spark, but he said he was beat and needed sleep. Next morning, I woke up and he was already gone. He shot me a text saying he had an early meeting he forgot to mention and would catch me later. That wasn't like him, but I let it slide and got ready for work. I picked out a sharp outfit, knowing I'd be heading straight to Jaden's after. All day, I texted James, but he didn't hit me back. By 4:17, I was second-guessing the whole thing with Jaden, but then James texted, "Love you. See you tonight." That settled me down like a green light to go through with it. So I met Jaden, and we got down to it. It was good, hot, wild, all that forbidden thrill, but it didn't touch what I got with James, and there was no love in it. I bolted after about an hour and a half, pulling into our place just past 6:40. James wasn't home yet, which worked out. I hopped in the shower and tossed my clothes in the wash to ditch Jaden's cologne stink. Didn't want James catching a whiff. Physically, I was satisfied, but man, the guilt hit me like a truck. I felt filthy, ashamed, torn up inside, battling myself over what I'd done. I decided to make it right. Cooked up a quick, tasty dinner for James, lit some candles, set the mood. I needed him to know I loved him, that Jaden was just a meaningless fling, nothing next to what we had. I was banking on us, ending the night tangled up together. He didn't roll until late, though. I kept calling, texting, nothing. Around 9:30, he finally texted, "Don't wait up, I'll be home late." I asked where he was, who he was with, no reply. I crashed out after midnight, wiped out. Woke up to the guest shower running, door locked, which ain't James's style. I knocked, got no answer. 10 minutes later, he steps out in a towel and says, "Hey, how'd your night go?" I said it was fine, then he cut straight to it. "Did you sleep with Jaden?" I told him not to put like that, but admitted, yeah, we'd hooked up. I asked where he'd been. Said he'd hit up some bars, went dancing. I smelled perfume on his clothes and pressed, "Who's she?" He said since he didn't sleep with her, he didn't know me a name. Then he dropped the hammer. Said he'd be crashing in the guest room and using that bathroom till I got 2 STD tests. Said he wasn't coming near me till I was cleared, talking about oral HPV and herpes like I was some walking hazard. When James laid out that STD test line, it crushed me. I was bawling, telling him this wasn't our deal. I made sure Jaden used protection for everything. He shot back, "Ever hear of oral HPV or herpes? I'm keeping my distance till you're in the clear, calling my own lockdown." I was a mess, crying hard, and told him I want to shut this open marriage nonsense down right then. This was the last thing I'd ever wanted. But James wasn't having it. "Nope," he said, "you got your shot, now it's my turn." I kept sobbing as he just said he was hitting the sack, had an early meeting and needed rest. He was out cold fast, but I couldn't sleep. I ended up on the couch, crying my eyes out till I passed out. Morning came, and James was gone before I woke up. Texted me, "Don't wait up." I tried calling, texting all day, no answer. I was losing it, feeling like I'd trashed our marriage. Jaden didn't have deliveries that day, so I didn't see him, but by 4:30, I couldn't take it. I called him, asked if we could meet that night. He said yeah, picked up on how wrecked I sounded, and I told him we'd talk at his place. Got there and laid it all out, told him I was done, that this was a huge mistake. I loved James, wanted only him, and explained how it was blowing up in my face. Jaden got it, but he asked for one last hookup, promising he'd back off after, except for work stuff. I said okay, and we did it quick, basic, over in under 10 minutes. When it was done, he griped, "That was awful. You just laid there like a log." I said sorry, told him this whole thing was on me, not him. Got dressed, gave him a last hug, and headed for the door. Right before I left, he muttered, "I'll never get women like you." I asked what he meant, and he just shrugged, "Nothing, forget it." With this look like I disgusted him, I bolted, crying the whole drive home, kicking myself for being so stupid. Driving home from Jaden's, tears streaming down my face, I couldn't believe how bad I'd screwed up. What did I ruin my marriage for? Nothing worth a damn. I felt like the dumbest guy on the planet, dirty and hollow. James didn't roll in till 1 o'clock that night, and I was a wreck, knowing I'd trashed my own life. Friday played out the same. He was gone before I got up, left a text saying, "Don't wait up." That coldness, that distance, it was killing me. I loved our mornings together, cooking his meals, our evenings cuddling, walks after dinner, just jabbering about nothing. All that was gone, and I ached for it. I texted him, said we needed to talk first thing Saturday. He shot back, "Fine, but early, I'm out for the day." I asked where he was headed, got no reply. He didn't get home till 1:30 that night. I stayed quiet, just laid there crying while he showered and crashed. I was up early, waiting in the kitchen when he walked in at 7 o'clock, pouring orange juice. The air was ice cold, no eye contact, him glued to his phone. I couldn't take it. Went over, plopped onto his lap, and said, "Look at me." He turned away, but I grabbed his face gentle-like and said it again, "Look at me." Staring into those brown eyes, I told him I loved him with everything I had, that I'd made a rotten choice, not a slip-up, a choice. I said I was sorry. I'd do whatever it took to earn his trust back. He just stared at me like I was nuts, didn't say a word. I asked if he loved me. Nothing. "James, please tell me." I begged. He finally said, "I don't know." That broke me. I started bawling, saying I could fix this. He said, "I don't think you can." I lost it, called him a bastard, and yelled, "You set me up, didn't you? Planned this to ditch me." He said no, but then admitted, "The second you floated that open marriage crap, I figured we were probably done. Read it somewhere." I shot back. "Then why didn't you shut it down? Tell me to cut Jaden off." He looked at me steady and said, "You can't make somebody stay true. Either they are, or they ain't, and you ain't." When James said I wasn't the faithful type, it cut deep. I was crying, telling him, "I'm true. Don't toss us out like this." He didn't say a thing, just stood up and said he was heading out, back after midnight. I asked where, but he kept walking. Then I remembered, tomorrow was Easter Sunday. We were supposed to hit the road at 7 o'clock to see my folks. My family loves James to death, and we're always with him for holidays since his parents moved to Florida. I said, "What about Easter and my parents?" He turned and said, "I ain't going." That floored me. I begged him to come, but he just said, "No," cold as ice. What do I tell them? I asked, desperate. He shrugged. "I don't care. Tell him the truth if you want." I pleaded with him to stay home with me, but he grabbed a gym bag, stuffed some clothes in it, and walked out. I was gutted, feeling like my insides had been scooped out. I'm sitting here now, tore up, needing help. I want you guys to throw me some ideas, any steps I can take to pull my marriage back from the brink. Anybody out there who's tried this open marriage stuff and made it through a mess like this, tell me. Can you bounce back from a betrayal this bad? I'd kill to hear from folks who've patched things up after going down this road. Thanks for hearing me out. I'm heading back to bed now, probably going to cry myself out for the rest of the day.